This is the Ducati Multistrada V4 Rally. It has 170 horsepower, radar at the front, radar at the back, semi-active suspension, more electronic systems than most of us will ever use. It weighs 260 kilos and costs as much as a family car. Which raises a pretty obvious question: do any of us actually need all of this? Well, of course, no we don't, but is that really the right question? If you love the look of adventure bikes, is this everything you could ever want from one? Does it deliver just as well on a rainy Tuesday on the M25 as it does on a sunny alpine pass in the middle of summer? I've spent the last couple of weeks trying to find out. Sadly, I didn't encounter either rain or the Alps, but I did rack up enough miles to discover whether this really is the ultimate adventure touring machine or simply adventure bike overkill. Before we get started, I'd just like to say a big thank you to BikeSure for supporting this channel and this video. And if you're due for a renewal on your insurance, I would highly recommend giving them a call. They can tailor cover for everything from motorcycles and scooters to trikes, as well as multi-bike policies if you've got more than one machine in the garage. You'll find a link in the description down below where you can go and chat to the lovely people at BikeSure, and they will find you a quote tailored specifically for your needs. Before we decide whether this is overkill or not, it's probably worth getting to understand what Ducati mean by rally. This isn't just a Multistrada V4 with a different paint scheme and some decals. Ducati has taken the standard bike and pushed it further towards long distance adventure touring. There's a larger 30-litre fuel tank, longer travel suspension, a taller and wider screen to improve wind protection, wire-spoked tubeless wheels, and Ducati's latest Skyhook semi-active suspension, complete with the excellent auto-lowering function. In other words, it's about making it capable of going further, carrying more, and asking less of the rider along the way. But, and this is an important question, does making it bigger make it better? Well, there's no denying it's a big machine. Fully fueled and ready to ride, it tips the scales at 260 kilos, and with that massive 30-litre fuel tank, it certainly feels substantial when you're moving it around in the garage. However, once you're rolling, even at walking pace, the balance is excellent. The throttle response is beautifully gentle, the wide handlebars give you plenty of leverage, and all that bulk starts to disappear pretty quickly. And that tall seat? Well, Ducati's auto-lowering suspension drops the bike by 30mm as you come to a stop. It doesn't sound like much on paper, but when you're balancing this bike on uneven ground, every extra centimetre can make a real difference. The weight never disappears completely, and I'd be lying if I said it did. But once you're rolling, it's one of those things that doesn't really trouble your mind. Then there's that slightly ridiculous matter of the engine. It is an engineering marvel, and Ducati has produced 170 horsepower from a V4 engine that weighs just 66 kilograms. But is all that power necessary for an adventure travel bike? Well, no, but also yes. Of course, what matters isn't that peak number, it's what that actually feels like in normal riding conditions. You'd expect it to be aggressive and intimidating. It isn't. In fact, it's a really docile, friendly bike around town. Then when you finally get the chance to open it up, all hell breaks loose and you're thrust forward at an alarming but yet thrilling rate. And that neat and tidy exhaust emits a sound not that remote from a MotoGP start line. But the thing is, it's in that middle bit where this motor really shines. Having that power and torque on tap means overtakes are effortless and the miles just disappear as you chase the horizon. No, you don't need 170 horsepower to tour, but you very quickly get used to having it. The bigger surprise for me isn't how fast it is, because it is, it's how something this size manages to feel when the roads get twisty. It's big, it's heavy, it's tall, and yet remarkably it's nimble. It manages to feel planted and light-footed at the same time. It's not a bike that is just good for munching motorway miles, then does okay on interesting stuff. It's engaging, entertaining, and just downright fun. It's designed to cover big distances, So what's it like after 2 hours, 4 hours? Well, this is one of the Rally's other strengths. I found the riding position excellent for my frame at 5'10" with a 32-inch inside leg. The seat, despite its loftiness, is plush and comfortable, and it's the same story for your pillion. The screen offers really good wind protection. Does a very good job. We've got this cutout in the middle which helps the airflow, stops that negative space building up in front of you, so I get no buffeting. I get a little bit of wind noise obviously, but I don't get any buffeting. It doesn't blow me around whether it's in the highest position or the lowest position, which we've got here, and this is the standard screen. One thing I always say when I'm riding a Ducati is they get the adjustment of those screens right, and I just wish some other manufacturers would take note. And I'm not hating on these other manufacturers at all, but you know, I had the situation with the V-Strom where the clamp was around the front, so you kind of had to get off the bike to do that. The early Honda NT1100s, you had a weird screen you had to squeeze with both hands, and you could only really do that again stood from the front. The new one is better, but it's still not as good as that. All the Ducatis, all the Multistradas with the screens, it's one finger up and down. It's simple, it's easy, it's effective. The radar cruise control is genuinely useful, and I think it's a much better experience than just using a standard system when the roads get busy. So I chuck along at 70. If I click the rocker switch to switch it on, you can see I've got the little green marker. Hit the set button. I'm now set at 70 miles an hour. What I have got for the radar cruise control are these little buttons, independent buttons. I don't have to go into anything in the menu, and that sets my distance. So if I press up, that gives me a long distance in between the vehicle and then the shortest distance. So if I go somewhere in the middle like that, there's a lorry in front of me which is obviously going to be going slower than that. So as I'm approaching that, it's now backing off the power, it's backing off the power, I'm not touching anything, and it's bringing me down to that level. That lorry is now braking. It's going to continue to bring that power off. And as you can also see, I've got the orange light here that shows me from my blind spot detection that I've got vehicles coming up around me. And if they come at you at speed, that flashes. If I indicate and pull out without touching the gas, it takes me back up to that preset speed. And that, I think, on very long motorway sense is an absolute godsend. Obviously that 30-litre tank means fewer fuel stops on your journey, and the fuel economy is better than I expected. Whilst it's not bad, it's not going to compete with something like the V2. Just looking at the last trip I've done on this, it's given me about 45 miles per gallon. You get a better range obviously when you're cruising along in 6th gear on the motorway. I've not been kind of holding back. I've done a lot of mixed roads, slow, naturally sort of lanes, little 30-mile-an-hour stints like this, and then giving it some beans in the nationals. 45 miles per gallon I don't think is particularly bad. Of course, obviously you do have this massive tank in front of you, so range is never going to be a problem between fill-ups. This bike is a real mile muncher, and having that extra horsepower and torque means that you just get whooshed along effortlessly. It makes travelling huge distances easy and comfortable. It's happy pootling around town, but when you get the chance to open it up, it just comes alive. This is a gentleman's sports bike, shall we say. It gives you that kind of performance, but in an armchair with a screen in front of you. And the handling matches that as well. We've got the electronic suspension on this. I've got this in touring mode, which seems to be my favourite mode. It does everything you need to do without the slightly more aggressive throttle response that you get from the sports mode. It is a magic carpet, beautifully plush suspension, well damped, very predictable, you know exactly what's going on, plenty of feel without it feeling harsh. Now I talked about off-road. I'm not really going to ride this off-road because it's got road tyres on it at the moment, or a kind of a 90-10 on-road off-road choice, and it is a big bike and I'm on my own, so I don't want to get myself into trouble. I'm not Chris Birch, that is for sure, but again I don't think it's the sort of bike that is going to be doing that. It can do it. I have seen these in action at the Ducati off-road school in Wales, and I watched Molly put one of these through its paces. Of course, one drawback of a fire-breathing 1158cc V4 engine is the heat it generates. So you've got two dirty great big cylinders that sit underneath your backside, and when the temperatures pick up you do notice it. Now it's 25 degrees roughly today, so not too bad. I was riding this yesterday, it was 33 degrees and it was noticeable, but it's not noticeable when you're moving. Ducati have got these clever little air ducts at the bottom here. They channel air past the engine, and once you're moving it whisks any warm air away from you. Works really well. If you're riding in the rain and you're finding that that's giving you wet legs, you can close the flap to stop rain coming through. And the other advantage with this engine is obviously when you're in town, stationary or crawling along, it will shut down the rear two cylinders and just use the fronts. So that gives you better fuel economy, but also generates less heat. Let's forget all about the glossy launch videos for a moment. What really matters is what this bike is like on the roads that you ride. Adaptive cruise, don't need it, loved having it. Blind spot warning, don't need it, but genuinely useful when the traffic gets busy. Semi-active electronic suspension, don't need it, but again absolutely brilliant to be able to change those settings at the touch of a button. The riding modes, quick shifter, hill hold, all add to the experience, and although again you don't need it, the experience was enhanced by having all this tech. None of these features on their own are enough to justify buying this bike. It's only really when you start adding them together that you begin to understand what Ducati was trying to achieve. The real drawback for all of this is the price, but I suspect that if this is a bike that is on your radar, that's not really going to trouble you greatly. Ducati calls this the Rally, and it's clearly capable of going a very long way from tarmac. But when I personally want to pick up at least 260 kilos of Ducati from the side of the trail, and would I want to pay for the repairs to this exquisite bodywork? The question isn't really, is this bike capable? Because it certainly is. The more poignant question is the person on top of it capable? But for crossing rough roads, mountain passes, gravel, carrying luggage, a pillion, and going wherever the journey takes you, this bike makes it easier for the average rider, and I think that's where its strength lies. You don't have to pretend that you're about to enter the Dakar, but it will tackle all that the average world traveller can throw at it, and maybe that's the whole point of a bike like this. It isn't designed around the 90% of riding you definitely will do. It's designed so that the remaining 10% never becomes the limitation. So where does all that money go? Does it feel expensive, or does it feel special? And I would argue the latter. The build quality and attention to detail is superb. The switchgear, TFT, paint, etc. all have that usual Ducati quality finish. And it's a culmination of all those details that determines how a bike makes you feel. And surely that is the most important element. Does that justify the price? Well, that is a question only you can answer if you buy one of these. It would be very easy to stand here and say to you, this bike is too expensive, too powerful, too complicated. And I'm sure plenty of people will. But motorcycles have never really been about spreadsheets. They are emotional purchases. If this bike makes sense to you, it doesn't have to make sense to anybody else. When I first picked this bike up, I genuinely thought, have Ducati just gone too far? After spending some time on it, has that changed? Well, I still don't think anybody needs a Multistrada V4 Rally, but I completely understand why somebody would want one. And if every time you open the garage door it makes you smile, perhaps that's the only justification that you need.